We are very delighted to see so much and unexpected large response to this webinar. And I take it as a sign that we obviously addressing a topic that fills a gap. There was indeed little, for a long time, little cooperation or even contact between artistic research, education, and music education research. Maybe the actors in the fields saw each other as competitors in the battle for funding, or very simply were not interested in each other's research and findings.
In this short talk, I would like to give some input to the discussion on artistic research in higher music education by focusing on one of the remaining issues, at least in my view, with regard to the integration of artistic research in higher music education at the bachelor's and master's levels, namely the relationship with the main subject courses in the curriculum. And I propose to shift the focus for once from the students to the main subject teachers. But let me first list some general observations. After some decades of artistic research integration in higher music education, it is no longer that strange new element imposed from the outside. It has become an inherent part of the educational landscape in the arts. In general, we can also observe that graduated students seem to be positive about what they have learned through doing artistic research. And there is also a natural link between the activity of doing research, which requires a certain degree of independency, and the current popularity of so-called student-centered curricula, which are all about giving autonomy to students in their educational path. And looking at my own institution, I can confirm that establishing a student-centered curriculum can indeed lead to more enthusiasm for doing research. It helps students better understand its value and its relevance for their future professional practice. I also believe that much of the initial resistance against artistic research within our institutions has diminished, even though many still have reservations concerning the relevance and the time investment needed. But here a generation gap seems to be manifesting. The younger generation of main subject teachers generally has experience conducting research themselves, while the older generation often only has indirect experience through their students. It probably depends on the institution and the national regulations, but usually there is different personnel for research education and research supervision and the main subject courses. Nowadays, teachers in research education often have a doctoral degree in artistic research, but that doesn't mean that they are also active as a main subject teacher in the same institution. Now, this may all seem logical if you consider artistic research to be a thing in itself, but if a very short definition, or better, a characteristic of artistic research, is that it works with questions emerging from the artistic practice. And if main subject teachers who feel very responsible for this practice are not involved with answering these questions, then we may have to do with a flaw in the system and tensions may arise. This may lead to the main subject teacher being a critical observer, looking at artistic research from the sidelines, but also not completely detached from it, because after all, their students are doing it. Now, what could emerge from such a critical perspective? First of all, I think that very often the best practices used to promote artistic research are often deviating from the common artistic practice, so also from the kind of practice that is taught within the main subject course. These strong examples may also hide a larger group of less successful projects. For instance, those lacking in self-criticality, contextualization, or simply a good methodology. And these may remain under the radar, but often the main subject teacher is aware of them, because again, it are their students doing it. Artistic research also puts extra pressure on the curriculum. Now, to my knowledge, The integration of research in most institutions has not led to a reduction in the weight of the main subjects, but rather comes at the expense of other, more theory-driven subjects. And the idea behind this is that artistic research is a holistic undertaking that can combine practice, reflection, and theory. Now, one can question whether that is always the best choice from an educational point of view. A large part of research education is focused on methods and values borrowed from other academic fields. When it comes to dealing with sources, with methods of collecting data, methods of documenting artistic practice, or developing writing skills, these are all relevant to doing research, but main subject teachers may consider the time investment needed to acquire these skills not relevant or essential to the artistic practice. And the same perception may be present with regard to the discourse on artistic research, which is often developed in the context of third cycle education, the doctoral level, and often also with an emancipatory or political purpose of claiming its own space within the larger academic field. Such purpose may be irrelevant to those students and teachers who have no ambition to continue as a researcher themselves. So all of this may lead to a lack of recognition of relevant artistic research potential at the first and second cycles among main subject teachers. But what research potential do students perceive in their artistic practice and in relation to their main subject course? In the past 5 years, I've analyzed the research proposals of master students at my institution, the Royal Conservatoire in The Hague. I published an article about this, but for the sake of our discussion, I will focus on a distinction between 3 different relationships between these research proposals and the main subject courses. A first group of students that I found in my analysis, and it's a fairly large group, stays very close to their main subject. Their research project could be regarded as an extension of what could already be found in their main subject course as a kind of proto-research. And classic examples of such proto-research could be in the jazz department, the imitation or the reenactment of famous jazz solos. In the classical department, it could deal with experimentation with different interpretations of repertoire. Or for early music students, it could be about playing from the manuscript, from the sources, so not from standardized music notation. Or in composition, the focus could be the integration of new technologies that also lead to new modes of interaction within performance. So in all of these subdisciplines, we can find elements of experimentation, of analysis and reflection that are already part of the daily artistic practice, so to speak. And from this perspective, we can argue that artistic research can be an extension of so-called proto-research in the main subject courses. And most importantly, this also means that the main subject teacher can act as an expert and give advice to such research projects. And that's also one of the reasons that in most cases with these kinds of projects, the main subject teacher will be very supportive. But then there is another group of students. They choose topics that are not necessarily part of the expertise of the main subject teachers. They search for support of their artistic practice by linking it to other knowledge fields, like psychology or sports sciences. They may be focused on preparing and auditioning, on dealing with performance anxiety, on mental training and learning processes, or also on more musicological topics or themes, or themes related to audience communication or curatorial practices. The challenge here might be to find the right expertise to support and supervise such research projects. But main subject teachers will often be supportive as well with these projects, because they see the relevance of the project, but also because they in most cases they do not interfere with the artistic dimension of the main subject course. Although we may also find some teachers who have doubts about the time invested by the student in such projects. But then there is a third category of projects. I would like to call them antagonistic artistic research. These are the more adventurous and experimental projects that I mentioned before, because they are often used also as examples of best practice of artistic research. They often combine different artistic disciplines like music with theater, or with dance or visual art, or even with cooking, or they may be focused on developing new kinds of musical instruments. They are often also emancipatory and engaged. We have many examples of students dealing with the gender representation in the classical music industry, for instance. Or they may be even critical and activist, for instance, dealing with topics of decolonization of Western art music. And often these projects are also transdisciplinary in nature, meaning that they not only combine disciplines, but also develop something new beyond a discipline, so to speak. So a real potential of artistic research comes to the fore here, a potential of becoming an engine of transformation of artistic practice. But the question, of course, is where is the main subject teacher in this? Because it doesn't need much imagination to understand how such projects, such antagonistic research projects, may come into conflict with the main subject course. This leads me finally to some suggestions to strengthen the relation between artistic research and the main subject courses. First of all, I think we need to demystify artistic research. It is not a thing in itself. It needs the artistic practice as a home, so to speak. That also means that it may be relevant to identify rather than integrate elements of proto-research in the main subject courses. And it may also be relevant to reverse the trickle-down approach. And with this I mean that we have the tendency in research education to look at the doctoral level and to look at the best practices developed there in order to apply them to some extent at the master's level, and then thin it out furthermore to the undergraduate level. But I think it might be a refreshing approach to act as if artistic research has yet to start, and to involve the main subject teachers in this from the start. Which also means that we may have to pay more attention to the disciplinary perspectives. And this may go against the trend in artistic research to emphasize the transdisciplinary aspect, which is relevant. But I think it's important to state that any disciplinary perspective may also be a good starting point to begin artistic research. I think it is also important to clarify the purpose of artistic research in education. The ambition is not to become a researcher in the first place. That may become an ambition at a later stage. But the reason why we have artistic research in the curriculum is that we aim to develop independent learning capacities. And I also think it is wise to show some modesty about what artistic research can achieve artistically within the limited time frame of an educational cycle. It will not necessarily lead to a better performance at the end of the research project. But it is about growing as an artist. And finally, I think it is really crucial that we invite main subject teachers not only for sharing their expertise with the first category of projects I described, like the projects that are already very close to their main expertise or their artistic practice, but also to invite them to participate in defining these more transformative research questions, and especially to convince them of the joy of contributing to this and participating in this. So this is what I had to tell about this in a nutshell, and I look forward to the discussion, and I thank you for your attention.
The aim of my project was to explore the transformation of a performer's voice through a process of transcribing and practicing solos by an iconic harmonica player. The project also investigates the affordance of the instrument and how they contribute to the transformation of voice. In this project, I also eventually explored how to apply my findings in my teaching in higher music education. So to fulfill this aim, I formulated 4 research questions, and we will be focusing on 2 of those. Firstly, how can a performer's voice be developed and transformed through a process of transcription and imitation? And voice here is the concept of having your own style as an artist. So secondly, in what ways can an application of the process of transcription and imitation contribute to student autonomy in the teaching and learning of music performance in higher music education? So let's first just look at an outline of the project, and we'll not be going into all of this. We'll focus on a few of these aspects. I am a harmonica player, mainly focusing on country music, and this project started with a massive amount of transcriptions, where I transcribed these 13 albums of country harmonica legend Charlie McCoy. You might not have heard of Charlie McCoy, but I am absolutely positive that everyone in this Zoom room has heard him play. He has been a very prolific session musician in Nashville, so you may have heard him play bass with Elvis Presley, or bass guitar or trumpet with Bob Dylan, or baritone saxophone with Roy Orbison, and certainly harmonica, which he has played with Jerry Lee Lewis and Simon and Garfunkel and a large number of country artists. And I transcribed all of the harmonica playing here, and I notated the transcriptions, but also did oral transcriptions. That is, I learned how to play these transcriptions alongside the original recordings. And this took quite an extensive amount of practicing, of course, and this is what I refer to as embodying the transcriptions, to get a good understanding of McCoy's idiolects. So after learning to play these transcriptions, I made an analysis of his idiolect, focusing on identifying a number of licks, that is short phrases, which are often occurring throughout his playing. And the next phase was to do practice sessions. This is what I call the lick generation phase, where I focused on each of these identified McCoy licks and dedicated a practice session to each of those, which I filmed and audio recorded, where I started playing this lick over and over again until I heard a suggestion to a change of that lick, some way to alter it in my inner hearing, which gradually transformed McCoy's licks from being less and less his material into more and more being my own original material. This is based on what I have called Charlie McCoy Lick 3, which sounds like this, which is very frequently occurring in his playing. And based on that and 2 variations that he did, I came up with these original licks in a practice session that lasted just a little over 20 minutes. And I have organized these. The colors denote which chord the lick is played over. So black color means the 5 chord or the dominant chord. Red color is the tonic chord or the 1 chord, and so forth. And the different shapes denote which note the lick starts on. this shape with rounded corners means that you start the lick on the root of the lick. The rectangle is the third of the lick. This is the flat seventh, and so forth. So now let's turn to the question of how knowledge production in artistic research can be applied in higher music education. So what I did during my PhD project was to design a 7.5 credit self-contained single subject course, which I entitled Harmonica Transcription. So I did 2 iterations of this course. I had 5 students in each course, and the harmonica students which took part of this were set with the task to transcribe at least one solo. They could do more if they wanted, but at least one. So basically I had them do what I did in my PhD project, but at a much smaller scale, of course. The transcriptions were they were allowed to choose which solos to transcribe, and this was an important part of the course. I wanted the students to have a strong sense of agency. And when we decided that the transcription was ready, they were set with the task to practice playing the transcription along with the original recording, once again to embody the transcriptions. And this was quite difficult for the students, but there is good software out there today, so they were able to, most of them slowed the recording down to maybe 85% of the original recording, so that they would have a chance of playing it alongside with it. After practicing those transcriptions, they were set with the task to select at least 3 licks from that solo, which they were particularly fond of. So after doing this lick selection, we moved on to the last phase of the course, the lick generation, where I showed them how I had worked in my own practice sessions with just playing the lick over and over until suggestions for changes started to pop out in my inner hearing. And I showed them various other strategies. If should this fail, they could start working more in a more cognitive way to just sort of analyze the lick and go, okay, this is a descending phrase. What happens if I start at the end and play it descending? Will that bring me any new ideas to make changes? And one important aspect of this course for me was to encourage student autonomy. And this was done partly by working with both formal and informal learning. So formal learning would be more typical to how you learn, well, basically how we usually work within higher music education, and how you learn to play classical music, and certainly how you've learned to play jazz in the past 50 years. Whereas informal learning is much more common when learning to play other styles such as country music, blues, rock and pop generally. And these 2 types of learning should not be viewed as a dichotomy, but rather that they are, as Folkestad puts it, 2 poles of a continuum where you can lean more towards one or the other, but really taking advantage of both forms of learning. Another way of working with student autonomy here was to combine the concepts of deliberate practice and explorational practice. Whereas deliberate practice is, well, for example, if you work on learning to play a scale, you want to learn how to play the Dorian scale in all 12 keys. So you have a set goal, you have a specific outcome. There is a right and a wrong way of doing it. Whereas then explorational practice, as Guru Graven Johansson defines it, it is practicing where the outcome is not known beforehand. So it allows creativity, and it's more like an experiment to see what actually comes out. And this, I would say, in the harmonica course here, where they practiced and embodied the transcriptions, that would be an example of the deliberate practice, where there is a set goal. You want to sound as close to the original as possible. But on the other hand, this process, the lick generation, that is more representative of explorational practice. When you start a lick generation practice session, you have no idea what the outcome will be. Hopefully it will be new original licks, but you have no idea what they will sound like. Now, returning to this question, how can knowledge production in artistic research be applied in higher music education? There's one thing that I have realized that we really shouldn't forget. It may seem quite obvious, but it's still easy to miss out on this, and that is to be really to take time to disseminate our research with our students. I have, during the course of this PhD project, I have every year made presentations both to our bachelor's and master students to present my ongoing research. And there has been quite a large amount of examples in our both bachelor and master theses where students have been more or less directly inspired by my work. We have had students who have worked with licks in a rather similar way that I have, and students that have also worked with transcription in order to transcription as a starting point for their own learning, and also a quite substantial number of students who have worked with finding or transforming their own voice as musicians. And this is an easy way to sort of connect these worlds of artistic research and higher music education that I think it's important that we do not forget. So with that, just short my references, and thank you very much for your attention, and thank you to Stefan and Gilvano and all the organizers for having me here.
Thank you so much for this invitation. This is a theme I'm very concerned about, and have some experience both from my former teaching position at RMC in Copenhagen and now at NNH in Oslo. The two presentations we had in the first set strongly resonates with me and actually wanted me to change my slides altogether. But I will keep on track, and I will go a little bit into how this artistic research is embedded in our institution, and for you to understand more about how it's structured and the content. I will focus in on the performance studies we have at the master grade, and these are the programs, and the blue ones here has a master forum, which is a course that supports a master project that all students have throughout the 2 years period, and the ingredients of that is based upon artistic research, I would claim. So this is the structure, easily put up. There's artistic specialization, principal instruments, and we've discussed that in the breakout rooms, and that's a conversation that are very relevant, how to connect what's happening in artistic research with the main instrument teachers at the school, and that's a conversation I hope we will continue. But what I will talk about here is that all the students on this program I just showed you have is a requirement that they formulate a master project that follow them throughout 2 years. A deepening of a specialization into certain subjects. And Master Forum is meant to support the students' master project work. As you can see here, they have also electives and a course called Music in Perspective that deals with how music works in society. So Master Forum, as I said, is supporting the bigger master project, their individual master project. And the purpose of the course is to arrange a forum where the students have the opportunity to share ideas and thoughts related to their own and others' master projects, as well as discuss and reflect upon artistic issues. And the learning objectives here is aligned with what I consider to be artistic research virtues, such as the requirement for reflection, contextualization, and awareness of methods used in their work. So all students, as I said, should propose a master project. And again, here in the requirements for a master project, we see that there are virtues of artistic research, such as contextual awareness, the use of methods, project organization, planning of activities, and communication and publication, and also some ethical challenges and risk assessment. Now, the Master Forum is structured into both large groups, which I'm responsible for. So I meet all first-year master students in large groups and have a sort of a form of a lecture where they get an insight into artistic research. And the goal is to help them working towards this master project proposal. And the last 2 years, I have been involved in reading and commenting all of these master project proposals so that I can actually have an overview over what the individual students are focusing on. And I don't really want to go deep into that, but let's say that Paul's presentation resonated very much with my experience here. What kind of topics each student choose to focus on. And then throughout the whole master study, they also have master forum in smaller groups, between 6 and 8 students in each of these groups. We also introduced a new thing last year that we have second and third semester. We have a presentation festival where the students present their projects to each other in very intense days. So in the master forums, both the big ones and the small ones, we're constantly working with project idea development, reflection processes, methods, conceptualization, activity planning, and also actively use research catalog as a way of documenting and both communicating. So every student has to deliver an exposition in research catalog for their exam portfolio. So I don't know how deep I should go into each of these themes here, but briefly, we try to create in this master forum an environment where we both work with individual reflection processes that could often it's orally, but they are also given some task of writing down and sharing their individual reflection. And of course, in this class, we work with how reflection could work in a collective process. Concerning methods, that's a very broad theme, but of course, all students have presentation throughout master forums, sharing their processes, and they have very different methods in some cases, very different focuses, and it's a place where they can share and inspire each other in terms of the methods that they use. Here we also both look into artistic research projects, for instance, projects on research catalog, but also are very aware that all of these methods, of course, is a part of practice outside artistic research as well. So this, I will come back to this danger of making a distinction between artistic practice and artistic research. A big part of the course is to let the students be more contextual aware. And also, again, when the students meet each other in these forums, there's a sharing of different contexts that enrich them and make them aware of where they situate themselves, inspire them to seek out further knowledge, further inspirations that are directly linked to their practice as well. Yeah, and we also encourage them very much, because we work in research catalog, to be aware of the documentation already from the start of the first semester. That could be included, of course, recording videos and pictures and all these multimedia possibilities they have within research catalog. And my experience is that this is something that the students are really happy about, the possibility to share their reflections, share their music, have sort of a diary, a blog in research catalog, because of this multimedia possibilities that allows them to express themselves individually. To avoid a distinction between artistic research and the students' artistic practice, and that is what actually I find most challenging, and a conversation I really would like to continue with all of you that have experience in this field. One thing that are my main focus when I teach in this master forum classes is to emphasize that we are musicians, we are performing musicians, and the practice, what I here have called action phase, is always going to be the most important. That's where the real experiment, inquiry, use of methods, you could say it's in our empirical data. That's where our output is. But where artistic research have influenced the study most is, of course, the emphasis on reflection. To pose research questions, to analyze, to go deeper in contemplation, and use that actively both after a performance, during a preparation of a performance, and for the performance itself. And then a research phase where you get to find more knowledge. You find artists that have the same problems, issues, challenges as you. You discover maybe an interdisciplinary field. There's a place where the students find inspirations, they get influence, and they get a lot of input. And all of this should be a well-balanced process. So I have students that find themselves in the action phase most of the time, which could be a good thing, but it lacks a reflection, and it lacks a research element to change their practice to the better. So this balance is what I find challenging, and I'm very, very aware that this is something that you have to guide the student and keep that aware. And this master forum classes is a way of nurturing all of these three fields, but keep an eye on the balance between them. So the master forum classes is then not just talking about sharing reflection, helping each other in the research element, but it's also to perform for each other, listening to recorded music and such. And one way, I will get back to that. So I'm also study responsible for a program that's called Individual Concentration Program, FRIMA, in Norwegian. And this is a rather strange program. So it's a program for students that kind of fall between shares, that are not particularly into jazz improvised music or classical or folk music, but have a sort of a split practice between all of different genres. So that could mean a folk musician that are deeply concerned with technology. It could mean a classical performer that are deeply into improvisation, etc. It could be a singer-songwriter that are not necessarily concerned with jazz improvisation and such. So what I would love us to discuss, there's so many things we could discuss, but what I would love us to discuss is this: what role does peer-to-peer feedback play in the development of artistic research, and how can it be structured to enhance critical reflection and innovation in music education? It's a broad question, but I gave a little bit example of this peer-to-peer feedback. And I would like to add that this, even though I talk about students here, I think this is equally important for our peer-to-peer at the staff of the institution. How can also create an environment and forums for the teachers to meet, to share their artistic practices. Thank you.
Hi, Arabella and I, say hello. We are happy to be here. We have three parts, and in the first one, we would just like to introduce to you our positionalities in artistic research, and also the, I think, kind of maybe special political situation in Germany we are facing, and maybe also struggling a bit with. And the second part will be two examples of our own teaching practice. And then thirdly, we're going to make a little wrap up and introduce to you some questions. My position in the field of implementing artistic research formats in the first and second cycle is twofolded. I was former professor for artistic research at the Hochschule for Music and Dance in Cologne. And there I created artistic research formats for first and second cycle only. Why? We will come to this later. But in 2018, when we started with this, it was quite new to do this for bachelor and master level. And our path was totally not directed to the doctoral degree. And this might be important for our discussion. And in my recent function as a professor for musicology and sound studies in Siegen, I actually implement artistic research in a totally transdisciplinary and much more broader way. I am very interested in discourses of artistic research within the sound studies, within feminist theory, and within musicology. And I'm also implementing artistic research as part of a teacher study program in close relationship with music pedagogy. And I think the discourse of music pedagogy is very, very rich for us artistic researchers.
contexts, as well as having a professorship for artistic research at the Hochschule für Musik Karlsruhe. I'm involved with the activities of the Orpheus Institute as a research fellow, but also in my responsibilities for the Collegium of the Doc Artes program. And due to the institutional necessities that Evelyn mentioned in Germany, we were confronted with the definitive nature of not having an integrated third cycle. And rather than considering this as a challenge or a barrier, I found it actually very freeing, because it allowed a broader look at the potentialities of artistic research for any person who puts their foot as a 17, 18 or 19-year-old inside of a German Musikhochschule. Meaning that all of the formats about which we're going to speak are to some degree conditioned by their formal environment, and the formal environment impacts the level of content which we can deliver. The freedom of not being required to provide a linear path to a third cycle allows, especially in the originating levels of bachelor's degree, for an exploratory and collaborative and non-hierarchical approach. One of the nice things, I raised my hand, I'm kind of allergic to PowerPoints in this kind of format, but one of the really nice things about not having one is that one can react flexibly to the three wonderful presentations that preceded us. I was so happy to hear about agency and antagonistic approaches in the first session, because this really speaks, I think, very much to both of our standpoints in institutional integration and curricular development.
Yeah. So maybe just one little overview. What is the political situation in Germany right now? What can we do? Of course, there are exceptions. For example, in Baden-Württemberg, as you know, Hochschule Freiburg, they do it already for some years, but I think because of time reasons, we'll just go on. But so I think there's a kind of a new development, because last year, the KMK, so the Kultusministerkonferenz, which is a conference of ministers of education and cultural affairs, they decided that there will be a trial phase to integrate a hybrid, so this means half artistic, half scientific postgraduate phase at higher music education institutions in Germany. This was last summer. They released a kind of 15 key points guidelines paper. And this paper, or the points mentioned there, are quite open, and the institutions and now the federal state, the 16 federal states of Germany, now have to decide what they will do with this guideline, with these key points. And just to give you one example of this list, and I think it's a critical point. They discuss how many professors should be in the advisory board of this doctoral phase, of this hybrid phase, and there should be 10 professorships involved, and 5 of them at least should have a scientific doctorate. And especially for smaller institutions, this will be a huge problem. So you see, we are on a way, but the tempo of how the different federal states in Germany will now implement this hybrid phase is of course different and very diverse. Some maybe go straight forward, and I think Arabella, you may just give an example of Karlsruhe later, but some maybe also slower. And I think there now is needed a power of the individual and to go really a step and make a step, because I think this paper is really a good beginning. So just to make it clear again, we have a bottom-up perspective in Germany because we were forced to be engaged in the bachelor and master's degree. And there was, until now, no option of starting a doctorate in artistic research. And in our view, this is how Arabella also said, this is not only causing disadvantages. I think it is also a chance to look more broadly on what role can artistic research actually has for the different praxis, the artistic scholarly, the artistic pedagogical, and the artistic educational, and I think also the artistic social. We will now give you 2 examples. So we are coming to the second point of our little talk. The first example I will give to you is from a bachelor course I developed, and its title is Unfolding the Future. I designed it for students in the middle of their bachelor program at the Hochschule in Cologne. So it is made for a collective, for a group of students coming all from different main subjects. And as Torben also mentioned already, this can be quite challenging. So having a heterogeneous group and dealing with artistic research that primarily builds on individual artistic experiences and knowledges. So how and what to learn then in a group? So my decision was actually to put the learning of methods in the center, like doing 80% learning of methods, and then applying these methods individually. The theory behind this course is Dala Crispin's idea of artistic research as a process of unfolding. And here she advocates that instead of adding knowledge, artists should be seen as an already existing body of different knowledges. And she had this really wonderful idea of the fold as a metaphor with art making itself, acting as the state of the unfolding and folding. So my question was, how can a course program let students in the BA experience themselves as an already existing and unfolding body of knowledge? And then the development of this course is, of course, deeply embedded in the work with my dear colleagues in the RAPP Lab project. And just to make a little teaser again, you can find all our results and so many great methods to apply on the research catalog. So the course program, you will see it now, exists of 5 steps. Then in each step, the students, they learn collectively the methods and then apply these methods individually to their own practice. And the aim is that they develop an own artistic research question. So we go to step 1. I go a bit quickly. I will show you some materials here I provided for them, or some materials from the students. It is very low threshold to ask them, how can I actually get into different relationships to one's own artistic practice? And this is for students in the BA not an easy thing. It's quite challenging to understand I can step out of the expectations my main subject teacher has to me. And it is a radical shift actually to consider then that I am my body, my practice is an own body of knowledge, and I can start doing a research project from this. So this is actually the experience of this first step to go and move and change perspective. And methods could be like 60 things to know about me, or autoethnographical timelines beautifully developed by Theodore Parker. He's also here in the chat and in the Zoom meeting, or just really normal mapping strategies. And then the second step is to curating ideas. And so to go into resistances, irritations, they can be non-verbal, pre-reflexive sketchings of ideas. And methods could be the beautiful questions. We can talk about this later. There's no time to explain it now. And they can conduct self-interviews. And then the third step is to create a lot of material which they can fill into a digital portfolio themselves. And they can do different artistic experiments. You can see here a cellist playing while another person is painting at the wall, or a violin player playing piano and violin with a bow on the piano at the same time, or doing some dramaturgical work. There, the singer with the moon, singing the moon from Clara Schumann. Or doing iterations, or as Eva Grideland very nicely has documented also on the RAPP Lab platform, the reflections in sound. And then the fourth and the fifth step will be that they should situate themselves. So you can say they have to put themselves into a context, but I think the first step is really to ask which question, which language is actually fitting to my artistic practice, and to be very playfully with this relationship between language and artistic articulation. And there are also really nice methods from Morten. I think he's also here in the Zoom meeting. It's called Poetic Lexicon, or from Joost from our Voice Institute, Feeling the Score, and this wonderful suggestion, Lighting from Sight, how artistic research and language can interfere together, from Aslak Nirnes. And then in the fifth step, they are invited to enact their process of unfolding through a live performance or a video documentation or a written paper. They can do it in their language, how they feel comfortable, how they want to do it. So this is what's just one overview of this course, Unfolding the Future, very much oriented at the theory, by the theory from Dalla Crispin.
And I'll keep mine quite brief. Thinking about an individual artistic research project on the level of the bachelor's is always going to be a bit of an illusion, because no music student exists in this kind of isolation. And the project which I would like to present is a good example of how an individual focus and a single question can lead to a much broader collaborative atmosphere. And these formats can, and I think should, be very flexibly integrated with one another. I am speaking about work with Tolga Anla, who's a wonderful percussionist and was close to the end of his bachelor's degree. Here's the first institutional barrier. There is no provision for anything other than an uncommented performance in the context of the bachelor's degree at the Hochschule für Musik Karlsruhe. But he was very, very interested in transcultural reflections between the music of the Janissaries. They were an elite troupe of the Osmanischen Army in the 16th and 17th centuries, and Western European music written for concert halls, among others Jean-Baptiste Lully, Johann Joseph Fuchs, and Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. And his idea was to draw these things not only from a musicological perspective, but from a praxeological perspective together. All of these discussions happened without either of us having mentioned the words artistic research. And I think that maybe to take a step backwards, if you're interested in hearing what this sounded like, he's got some clips up on YouTube, and they're great. But what's really vital to developing this kind of individual project is to encourage the curiosity and the ownership of knowledge and expertise on the part of the individual. Also, in my work with individual projects, it's a reflection of Evelyn's approach, in which Dalla Crispin's centrality of unfolding is very much present, against an institutional structure which unconsciously encourages a narrowing of expertise. I think artistic research in the first and second cycle can empower students and teaching professionals to expand their definition of expertise and competence. And what arises are autonomic, project-based formats and very much student-led learning. This is extremely valuable for people who are integrated into the project afterwards, because the final presentation was a concert with multimedia examples, so iconography, a commentary from the participants, and of course live performances. And during the rehearsal process, Tolga, who was in conversations with me, very much somebody who was developing a project with the facilitation, thank you very much for that wonderful formulation. I said, yes, I recognize that. With my facilitation, he in turn became a facilitator for other participants, expanding the rings of knowledge transfer and experience of artistic research in non-hierarchical contexts. And it's with this background that I would like to lead to our questions about teaching and learning formats, because in my experience, the most fruitful is a flexible and open response to the curiosities and needs of the students and the principal study teachers. An integration between individual work, scheduled collective work, and intensive formats for exchange. I have experience here from the Orpheus Institute with workshops on artistic research in music, in which participants are brought together for 5 days in order to discuss the projects which they've developed very much in the way that Tolga developed his, with their peers, but also with people at different levels of experience and expertise. And I would strongly propagate the idea that the broader the palette on formats for learning and teaching, the more effective we can find points of integration. Because the situation in Germany is such that we don't have a divide at the moment between artistic practice and artistic research, largely because artistic research has not yet gained its roots. And this is a wonderful opportunity to integrate from the bottom up. And I hope that in terms of questions regarding curricular cohesion, modes of learning and modes of teaching, and also the broader goals of artistic research, that we can have a continuing and fruitful discussion about how to encourage these integrative and open structures while maintaining an identity as artist researchers. Thank you very much.
Time we think to just get feedback from all of you here in the room, and it would be great, you know, and we really invite total chaos here. So if you want, anyone has ideas that you want to paste in the chat window, we shall look at them. If you want to email us later, that's also very welcome. But we're also happy to discuss things now in this final part of the session. But I think you can rest assured that we will get back to you, or rather announce more seminars like this, and also have a serious think about what are good formats.
So maybe I can start and say a few words. Yeah, so in representation of the students who are being present in this seminar right now, I would like to share that I find it a very exciting perspective to kind of integrate artistic research within musical curricula, even though for practitioners or composers who not necessarily enter as, you know, aspiring researchers, I feel like I have been missing that in my own experience. I mean, in conservatory, because I've had past background in Scotland, which was way more critical and reflective. But maybe as a composer, learning like expertise within the practice, I think it would have helped a lot to also gather that perspective. And I am integrating it now with a specific master in artistic research. So I will try and encourage all of you to pursue this goal. I feel it will represent an incredible opportunity for students. And yes, I would like to thank you, all of you, for the work you're doing. And I really hope this is going to be implemented very shortly. Thank you.
Personally, I found it really quite exciting to see what happens with students when you give them the possibility to identify their own goals and challenges in their studies.
I think it helps positioning your own self among other practitioners. So in this sense, like peer-to-peer can help a lot to really, you know, for a young student to kind of have a perception of their own place in the academic and professional world. I mean, it has a personal meaning that also goes beyond, I think, educational purposes.
And it's a great challenge, you know, how we organize these peer-to-peer situations, as Torben was mentioning before.
What I mentioned about this peer-to-peer learning regarding the students and the Master Forum is something I think we need to do at the faculty as well, for our colleagues, the teachers, to avoid that distinction between artistic research mafia that we actually have been called inside our institution, and the main instrument teachers. So I think we need to have an environment and some forums for, together with our colleagues, to have a deeper understanding of what we do as artists, and share our processes and be transparent. And I think that's one way of avoiding that there's some inside institution that has this special competence of artistic research that are very foreign to the other teachers.
It's a great point. I mean, it's like we talk a lot about how we build research environments, but what we're actually sort of needing is it as a united research and teaching environment, right? Finn.
Yeah, thank you. At the AEC, we have since a couple of years back at all our events had some safe space sessions. You know, working a lot with diversity and inclusion and so on, and maybe a way of creating a barrier-free environment where you can talk to each other, students to students or student to teachers, Also because we talked about many main subject teachers maybe are a bit hesitant to entering into the dialogue because they don't want to show that they actually don't know so much about autistic research, and so this idea of creating a safe space, I think, would be something that that could be useful.
It's a comment here from Stephen Broad. I can read it out. It's important to share practical experience of how common understandings are developed in practice. Peer-to-peer feedback does this at the student level. We've started to discuss today how to do this at the faculty level. The doctoral education, much discussed but always dynamic, does this in the third cycle. Sharing practical approaches at all levels feels important. And I think there's something in there also, you know, how do we create these situations that maybe, you know, like safe space is very small or more practice oriented, you know, so how can we create spaces also for students to share experience more like as if they were in a rehearsal space? Henrik.
Well, I think for our master students, one of the challenges is that many of them come, I work in composition, so many of them come with the project that they want to pursue. So they work on that for 2 years. But the writing of the thesis always comes at the end of that process. So there is a kind of unfortunate structural division of the two things that makes part of the final thesis. So one of the things that we're trying to do now is, and Matthias should correct me if I'm wrong, but make the final thesis project just one project, 30 credits for the last semester. And no matter if they've started their artistic work before or not, once they enter into that, we make no distinction between who is a supervisor and who is a teacher. So it might just be that the teacher is also the supervisor for the thesis, if that works out. Or you divide it up in several groups, but that also means that one teacher usually has several students. So it becomes a natural sort of interaction, hopefully, between both students and supervisors, which can lead to group supervision, which I think group supervision is one thing that I think can be explored more, and which can be a catalyst for peer-to-peer feedback.
But one thing that could be good to discuss further is the format of the degree project. You know, so how to integrate it in the students' learning process in the best way, and how to be more flexible about how they are produced. So maybe to think more about portfolio models where you actually produce parts of your thesis as you go along.
I have one comment regarding the peer-to-peer between teachers and also students. At the SMUC at my university, we're starting a project developing a platform for protocol-guided interactions between students and teachers, in which a group of students or students and teachers could select different types of interactions that are guided by a protocol of different stages, and they could internationally exchange ideas about their processes and their tools and their methods. So maybe I think maybe something that maybe is lacking, or I don't know, specific platforms that actually allow for this, you know, safe spaces that at the same time are really much focused on meaningful interaction. So something really guided and really clear, but at the same time open to meet with anyone that you don't know yet. So this may be something to develop in the future.
You know, what we've heard in this short discussion here is that, you know, it would be really good to get suggestions for topics like that, you know, so like digital platforms for teaching, how can that work? You know, different formats for the degree project, different formats for peer-to-peer learning, curriculum development, you know, courses on the bachelor and master's level, you know, the whole program design. I mean, there are many different topics that one could introduce and you know, try to bring a group of people together that would be keen to share experiences and jointly develop quality.
There were a couple of points that were several times mentioned. For example, the relation between main subject teachers and artistic research, and there are many aspects with that, but also the relation between artistic research and music education or music education research. And I think the idea of to create whatever kind of safe spaces in the end would be a good mean to low down anxieties and thresholds, because there are maybe many people who don't dare to step further in an area which is unknown to them, but they are keen to know more about. I would say last, thank you very much to all of you. Thank you to Gilvano and your team. Thank you to Stefan for making this possible. I was very happy we will hear from each other.
It's been a really good start, I think, but let's make the continuation even better.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.